You seek the fabled talisman, but there are many, and so your journey may span many realms. But have you got what it takes to reach the crown of command and claim victory for yourself? Hello and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter and today we are doing, yes you've probably guessed it because it's right here, another Talisman character guide, and this time it's the dwarf's turn. Where is he? I think he's in here somewhere, climbing up the steps, doing something with the sword. Is a dwarf. Yes, we are going through all the base game characters first, and we've only got a few left now, and then we'll be exploring the expansion characters as well. But you see, with the dwarf, at first glance you might think, well, you know, can I win with this character? Well, here's some tips and hints to make it so. The dwarf, yes, what is he all about? Or she? I guess you could play it as a she-dwarf and just... because I think she-dwarfs have beards as well, don't they? Anywho, what is the dwarf all about? Well, the dwarf starts in the crags and his alignment is neutral. Strength 3, craft 3, life 5. You get 5 lives. Most characters get 4 lives to begin with. You have 5 fate, and also, like most of the characters, the starting quota for gold is 1. Now, the reason why in the little intro I sort of said, well, you might be, is the dwarf gonna... Well, it's a split character, if you like. Not a split personality, or maybe there is a split personality there. Maybe that's the player that's playing it. Anyway, that's a side issue. It's because it's split craft and strength equally, which is 3 and 3. And so therefore, it's almost like, well, my character is equal rather than, oh look, I'm like the troll who's got, you know, a lot of strength versus craft, and it's pretty obvious that the troll's strength lies in strength, in fighting, as opposed to craft. Or you've got, say, a magic user that has craft 4 or 5 and then strength 2, it's pretty obvious that they're magic users. So when you have a mixed character that's 3 and 3, then it's kind of like, okay, how do I play this one? It could be slightly trickier. Special abilities are, now the dwarf does have a lot of special abilities. That is one of the plus points with the dwarf. So I'll rattle through them and then we'll go into more detail in a second. So number 1, you need not roll a die in the crags or the chasm, unless you wish to. If you choose to roll, you must accept the result. Obviously, though, you can use fate to re-roll. 2, you may evade creatures and characters in the hills. 3, we should get the counting, shouldn't we? 3, After rolling the die in the cave, you may add 1 to the score. 4, You need only roll 1 die if you attempt to open the Portal of Peril. No, sorry, the Portal of Power by craft. Portal of Peril is a new fighting fantasy book by Ian Livingstone, by the way, which we have done a review of. And number 5, you need only roll 2 dice in the mines. And the last one is number 6, you are unaffected by the maze. So the dwarf strength isn't necessarily obvious to begin with, but it is actually, it's to do with being spread over a number of areas, not just a specific one, like say attacking another player or constantly trying to use your spells up, you know, because you always get a spell. So it's spread out sort of over various elements of the game, and it spans also the length of the game, rather than just say early on in the game where you would gain an advantage. So for example, you need only roll 2 dice in the mines. Well, that's when you're trying to actually go to the Crown of Command. That's trying to get into the inner region. So that's later on in the game. So, you know, that's why you kind of think, oh, the dwarf, I don't really know where to focus. Well, you don't focus on one aspect, you focus on many aspects. So let's go into the special abilities in detail. 1, you need not roll the die in the crags or the chasm unless you wish to. If you choose to roll, you must accept the result. Unless, of course, you've got fate, and you can pay 1 fate to re-roll the die, and then you have to accept that result. So why is that useful? Well, it means you can land on these spaces without suffering any consequences. In terms of the crags, what you do in the crags is you roll 1 die. If you roll a 1, you're attacked by a spirit with craft 4. Well, obviously, you might land on there because when you roll the dice, you have an option of going, clockwise or anti-clockwise. The other space you might not want to go to and want to encounter. So you might just want a safe, I'm going to do nothing this round. So you go, well, I'll land on the crags. I won't choose to engage with it. And therefore you won't, potentially roll a 1 and get attacked by the spirit. Equally though, if you don't engage with that space, you're not going to get the reward. So the chasm, that's roll 1 die for yourself and also 1 for each of your followers. So obviously that becomes more tricky because you don't want to, because if you roll a 1 or 2, when you roll for yourself, you lose 1 life. If you roll a 1 or 2 for each of your followers, that follower is killed. So out of those 2 spaces, the chasm to me is more dangerous. So I would never choose to engage with the chasm because there's no reward. It's just misery all the way. So that's really handy because sometimes, again, it might be better just to land on that space, use your special ability and avoid any pain and suffering. But as I say, that kind of does with the crags, you could miss out on the reward, which is if you roll a 6, you will get a what is it? I think it's a strength that you get, or a craft. So one of those, I can't remember now. So it's a strength or a craft that you would get if you roll a 6. And remember, you have got 5 fate. So again, if you do roll a 1, you can re-roll and hopefully you'll get a 6 on the second roll. Number 2 special ability, you may evade creatures and characters in the hills. Now it doesn't sound particularly useful, but why is that useful? Well, there are 2 hill spaces in the outer region, which is where you start, and there's also 1 of the hill spaces in the middle region, which is a little bit more tricky because you can lose lives in the desert. So when you go into the middle region, you kind of want it to be powered up a little bit more. So landing there is that you can, if you land on the hill space, it says draw 1 card, and it is a creature enemy, because there are other types of enemies. But if it's a creature enemy, you can just evade it, which means you choose to ignore it. It doesn't see you, it doesn't spot you, so you can just choose to ignore it. Equally, if a character lands on you and decides that they want to fight you, another player character lands on you and they want to fight, then you can just say, well, you know what, I'm going to evade this battle. So again, it's a little bit of a respite, a little bit of a safe haven. So it is useful in that respect. Obviously, you can choose to engage as well. You don't have to evade. So obviously, if you do want to, tackle that creature, you can use that special ability. It's not a you have to evade. And number 3, after rolling the die in the cave, you may add 1 to the score. Why is this useful? Well, this is kind of a lot to do with it, because it's an adventure card, the cave. It's not the Warlock's Cave, which is a space. It's the cave adventure card. And I'll just read what it says on the card. It says, the cave will remain here for the rest of the game. See what you discover by rolling 1 die. If you roll a 1, you're attacked by Dragon Strength 7. If you roll a 2, you're attacked by Goblin Strength 2. 3 is lost for a turn. 4 is gain 2 gold. 5 is gain 2 gold. 6 is gain 3 gold. So, obviously, if you roll the die, you can add 1 to the score. So if you roll a 3, you get 4, and then that's a positive. So most things in Talisman, 1, 2, and 3 roll are horrible. 4, 5, and 6 are rewards. So it will help you when you get the cave. So it's good if you want the cave to come out, because it's in the adventure deck, to just land on as many where it says draw 1 card as possible, so to make sure the cave actually comes out, because obviously there's only 1 card out of the base game cards that is going to be the cave, so you do want it to come out. And obviously the best way to do that is by going to the hills to go and try and draw those cards, because you can evade any big scary creatures that crop up. Number 4, you need only roll 1 die if you attempt to open the Portal of Power by craft. Why is that useful? Well, the Portal of Power is the space in the middle region that is the main way of getting, it's not the only way, but the main way of getting to the inner region, so you can get to the Crown of Command. Now, the Portal of Power says here, if you're crossing into the Plane of Peril, do not draw a card. Instead, you must first use craft to pick the lock or strength to force it. Choose which ability you're using, roll 2 dice. if the total is equal to or less than your chosen ability, move to the plane of peril. If it is higher, remain here and lose 1 from that ability. So obviously, by only rolling 1 die, your chances of getting through that challenge are much, much better. So it is, that's what I mean by some of the special abilities you will need later on. They kind of lay redundant for a lot of the game, but later on in the game, they then come into their own. If number 5 is you need only roll 2 dice in the mines. So again, when you get into the inner region, you've got a choice. You can go one way or the other way. One way is a little bit more strength orientated, another way is a little bit more craft orientated. And because the dwarf starts with 3 strength, 3 craft, it's kind of, you know, haven't got an advantage in either or, but because your special ability leads you down the craft route by going to the mines, you're more than likely, you know, I would, if I was playing the dwarf, I'm more than likely concentrate on craft because I want to actually go down the craft route to use this special ability. So the mines is roll 3 dice, subtract your craft from the total and move directly to that space. So if you, once you roll the dice, and again, losing 1 of the dice, so if you only have to roll 2 dice makes this so much easier because you'd roll the 2 dice, then you subtract your craft from the total. If you get a 0 or minus number, you stay in the mines, which is what you want because then you move on to the next space and progress further on your next go. 1 is the plane of peril, 2 to 3 is portal of power, 4 to 5 is the warlock's cave, and 6 plus is the tavern. So you get booted further out the higher the number. And that's what I'm saying, since you start with an equal craft and strength, you will probably, because of that special ability, want to focus a little bit more on the craft. But equally, you do want to build up your strength as well. And number 6, you are unaffected by the maze. Now, why is that useful? Well, it's kind of useful. It's kind of useful, especially early on in the game. The maze is an adventure card, so again, it may or may not come out during the game. But it says that it will remain here for the rest of the game. Whenever you land on the maze, if your craft is less than 5, you must miss 1 turn. So it's not a biggie if you have got less than 5, your craft is less than 5 because you just miss a turn. But you know, that's what I'm saying. It's an okay special ability. So there's a little bit of protection, especially because you start with craft 3. Obviously, if it comes out early on, then that's better. So if the maze comes out early on, then that's better because your special ability is used. But then again, if it comes out later on, you've probably powered up past 5 anyway. So, you know, it's a bit of a hit and miss, that special ability. The downsides of the dwarf, well, it's not really any. I guess if there was, there's not one particular focus on how you should play the dwarf. It's very split. He's 3 strength, 3 craft, so it's not like he's got an advantage in strength or craft. And also, his special abilities aren't focused on one area. As I say, it's not focused on fighting, it's not focused on magic. Again, it's split evenly over, and I think that kind of reflects, I guess, the dwarf's nature. They're into a lot of different things, aren't they? Quite curious animals, curious beasts. They're not beasts, they're dwarfs, but you know what I mean. They're quite curious people, and so I guess they would roam the land, wouldn't they, looking for gold and looking for adventure. So it kind of works quite thematically. Favourable places for a neutral character. So as a dwarf is neutral. In the outer region, visit the graveyard, because if you're neutral, you can replenish up to your fate value of 1 gold per fate. And of course you've got 5, so that's good to keep going back, keep that nice topped up. Chapel, again, you're neutral, so you're not really going to be affected by it. You can heal up to your life value, which is very, very handy. That's 1 gold per life. Crags, go to the crags, because if you roll 1 die, yes, you might get attacked if you roll a 1 by Spirit with Craft 4, but equally, if you roll a 6, the Barbarian leads you, you gain 1 strength. Ah, there it is, it's a strength. And so obviously that's what you want. You want to build up your strength, you want to build up your craft. And remember, you do have 5 fate, so again, you can be a little bit more liberal with your fate. The forest, go there, because equally it's the opposite of the crags. If you roll a 6, a ranger guides you out and you gain 1 craft. 5, visit the city. Now this can be a little bit dicey. See what I did there? Go to the city, go to the enchantress. You can gain a craft strength, or you can gain a spell as well. If you roll 1 die, If you roll a 1 though, you're turned to a slimy little toad for 3 turns. So if you're a toad, you drop all your, your followers leave you, you drop all your items. So doing it early on in the game, if you've not got a lot of items or many followers, then you're not going to be losing that much if you're turning into a toad. Remember, you also have fate as well, so you can re-roll the die. So 4, 5, and 6. 4 is gain a craft. Strength is 5 is gain a strength, and 6 is gain a spell. So it's kind of worth dipping your toe into the enchantress, so to speak. And I would also go to the Ruins and also Oasis, because you can draw 2 adventure cards in one go, which is always good, because obviously the more adventure cards you pick, the more likely you are to get good stuff, as well as enemies. You do want to fight enemies because you want to collect them as trophies to cash them in for strength or craft. If you are trying to draw lots of adventure cards, I would also go to the Hidden Valley, because you can draw 3 adventure cards there. So again, you can you can quickly go through the adventure cards, especially if you're looking for the cave, which you can use one of your special abilities. So, place to avoid in the outer region, none. Neutral characters are quite safe in the outer region, and also in the middle region. There's nothing really that affects a neutral character specifically. And the best route to go in the inner region, well, it's a difficult one because you've got strength 3, craft 3 when you start. But because of your special abilities, I normally I concentrate on craft. So I would go what I term the craft route, which is the mines, which, as I said, you roll 3 dice and you subtract your craft from the total, and hopefully you'll get a minus number or 0. And then the next space is the vampire's tower, which you roll 1 die to determine how many lives the vampire takes from you or your followers. You can push your followers instead. You can sacrifice your followers. So 1 to do is lose 1 life or a follower. 3 to 4 is lose 2 lives or followers. 5 to 6 lose 3 lives. So again, that's to do with lives rather than strength or craft. Pits is the next one. Fight the pit fiends. Roll 1 die to fight that many pit fiends with strength 4. Each 1 by 1 until you either are defeated or you defeat them. So it's not that difficult. You could probably, if you have a strength of 8 or 9, you're probably safe with that. Some people I know house rule this and say, well, look, why is that a strength when it's more the craft route? Because the other route doesn't start off strength and then you have to do something with craft. So why have they done that? So you could change it that it's craft rather than strength. So just to recap, draw as many adventure cards as possible to try and get the cave out, because then you can get gold, and when you get gold, you can go to the blacksmith and buy weapons and armor. Go to the hills as much as possible, because then you can draw those adventure cards, because you can evade creatures and players. It's a bit of a safe haven for you. Visit the graveyard to replenish the fate. Also go to the chapel to heal up your lives, for money obviously. Go to the crags to gain a strength, go to the forest to gain a craft. If you can, remember you've got fate, you've got 5 fates, that's a good starting number. And also go to the city to the enchantress to gain craft strength or a spell. And go the craft route. But obviously if you have powered up your strength, maybe go the other route as well. And there we are, those hints and tips, so that you as the dwarf can claim your rightful place in history and wear the crown of command. Thank you so much for watching another Talisman character guide. Hope you enjoyed that. The dwarf can be a little bit tricky to have a focus on how to play him, because Talisman is quite a sprawling game, and I always think if you've got a focus, it really helps you to kind of power up fairly quickly. So as I say, it's a mixed focus. But now you kind of, hopefully those hints and tips have inspired you to win as the dwarf. As I said before, we have done some other character guides, but not only that, we have reviewed the base game. This is the 4th revised edition from Fantasy Flight, and all the expansions that were, all the official ones anyway, that were launched by Fantasy Flight in the 4th edition revised. But that is not all. We have lots of other board game reviews as well, and also film reviews, fantasy book reviews. We've also done a little mini series on folklore, fantasy folklore as well, and we're going to continue to make those as well. We've also got imp chats, we've got unboxings. Oh, we've got over 400 episodes on our channel now, so check all of those out. And obviously, if you enjoyed this, you might have some friends and family that would enjoy these videos as well. So share the word of the imp. You know what to do. So thanks for watching, and remember to keep it real, especially to keep it real. What? To keep it unreal, because this is fantasy, especially if you're a dwarf and you like the thrust of battle.